Okay, so I'll start with basic and 4, but I'll teach some things since you might need to work on your own systems. We can start with a very little bit introduction to what Android Studio is and how we're doing stuff with it. So Android Studio is basically a version of IntelliJ IDEA, which is basically who's the guy? I forgot the name. Okay, so it's basically IntelliJ IDEA's modified version for Android. It's an IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment, because basically you have all the tools available, not just for coding, but for database inspecting, logs, terminals, and basically everything you need to develop an Android program. So that's what the IDE is for. And to open a new project, you'll go to File and click on New Project. And once you go to the new project, you will see different things like phone, tablet, Wear OS, Android TV. Lot of devices are available. But since we'll be working mainly with phones, we'll be choosing phone and tablet. And in that, you can just choose the empty activity, because we do not need any bottom navigation or any arrows. I mean plus icons over here. We just go with the empty vanilla thing. And once you go with that, you have to choose. You have to select your application's name. Like you have to type in your name over here, and I'll just give a random name. I'll just say test or something. You can give your name, and below that there'll be something called as a package name. This is basically the entire package, entire repository of code. Your entire repository of Android code will be stored inside this package. So you can change this, or you can leave it as such as COM example test. But you can change it if you want. And the language that we use is Java. There's also Kotlin available, but we'll not be using Kotlin. And you'll have to specify the minimum SDK, which is basically the least version of Android that you'll be supporting. So I've chosen Android Nougat, which means that any Android versions up and above Nougat will be supported. Up and above Android 7 will be supported. The below versions will not be supported. This app will not run on devices that are below Nougat, like Marshmallow, Gingerbread. It won't work on those things. So after that, you'll just give finish, and a new project will be created. Since I've already created my project, I will not do this right now. I'll just give cancel. So we're looking at exercise 3, which is basically how to display graphics and how to animate images, and that's what exercise 3 is all about. So in my first main screen, I just need palette. I'll go through this one by one. So once you create a project like this, what you'll have is a main activity.java inside the Java folder, and inside the rest folder you will have something called as activity main. So these are the two default things that Android Studio creates for you. So inside activity, if you go to activity main, you'll just have an empty layout basically, which will by default be constraint layout. Constraint layout is basically something. It is an XML layout. There are different types of layouts available, like linear layout, relative layout. Constraint layout is basically when you need to put components onto the front end UI. Each component will be horizontally and vertically constrained to some other element inside the UI window. So basically, I have 3 components over there: shapes button, animate button, transform button. There are 3 buttons available over there, and each one of them will be horizontally and vertically constrained. This is the easiest one to work with for us, but you can try out relative layout and linear layout if you want. Linear layout is basically when components are linearly arranged one after the other horizontally or one after the other vertically. It can be either way. And relative layout is also available. You can check that out. But I prefer using constraint layout because it's easy for me, and it should basically suffice for our needs for this lab. So we'll just stick with constraint layout. We can change the layout if we want by right clicking this and going to convert view, and you can see there is linear layout, coordinator layout, relative layout, frame layout. There are different things available. You can just change it if you want to. I'll just stick with constraint layout. So once you do all that, you will have this something called as a palette. The palette is where you will be having your UI components. You can drag and drop UI components from the palette to your UI window. So I have buttons over here. So basically they are buttons. So you can just click a button, and then you can add a button like this. If you add it to design, it will add it to the design. You can see the button somewhere over here. It's not appearing. I think it's hidden. Okay, fine. I'll just delete it for now. So once you place the button over there in constraint layout, what you need to do is you need to first horizontally and vertically constrain the button as I said, because it's a constraint layout. If you do not do this horizontal and vertical constrainment, what will happen is everything will just be cluttered to one side of the UI, and you will not be able to distinguish from different components. Let's say I'll just delete this vertical constraint, and I'll remove the horizontal constraints as well. As you can see, it's now shifting towards one side. So this is not supposed to happen, right? Like you want them to be in, you want the shapes button to be in the center, and it should be somewhat below towards the center of your screen. So you should horizontally and vertically constrain them. And to do that, yeah, I'll just open the attributes tab. So inside the attributes, you can see there are different attributes available over there. There's something called ID, there's something called layout width and height. So layout width and height sets the width and height of your button, or basically whatever component. And you can set the text using the text attribute. I will set it as shapes, and you can set the text size. I've set it as 18sp, and there's a text style which I've set to bold. You can also change italics and normal. You can change all those things. And this is the constraint that I was talking about. Inside, if you there'll be something called as layout inside the attributes, and inside that you can see something like a box model. And on top of the box model, you can see that there is something called as 250 over here. This specifies that I want this button 250 pixels below my 250 pixels below my vertical constraint. My vertical constraint here is my at the top of my UI window. So it should be 250 units below the UI window's top border. So that's what this specifies. If I put it as 0, as you can see, it moves back to the top. So if I give 250, it will somewhat be towards the center. And yeah, I forgot to mention one more thing. Once you install Android Studio, by default there will not be an emulator installed. You need to install an emulator to run the applications on your system, like on your like it will emulate an Android phone in your system. So for that, what you need to do is you should go to Tools and go to AVD Manager. And inside AVD Manager, you can see that I have something called as a Pixel 3a emulator installed. Like basically, that's a Pixel 3a device. But if you do not have any device installed, this will be empty. There will be nothing over here. For that, you need to create virtual device, and inside that you can just choose any device you want. Since I've zoomed in too much, you may not be able to see the thing clearly. But I think I don't know how to increase the size of this thing. But there will be devices below there. There will be Pixel devices, Nexus devices, LG devices, whatever. Like there will be a lot of devices, but with different resolutions. That's the difference. Like something will be 1020 into 1080 to 1920, something will be 2280 into 1080. There'll be different resolutions. You just choose something that's standard. The standard thing that I like to work with is 1920 by 1080, because most devices are usually 1080p screens with 1920 resolution, and it will support most phones that way. But if you try to run this device on a tab, it might not look as neat, because tabs are generally having a higher resolution. So you need to select a different device for that to test the tablet. Test a tablet if you want to. So once you install that, it will appear over here, and then you can wipe the data if you want to. Like it will just erase whatever. It will just factory reset the device if you want to, and if you click delete, it will just delete the virtual device. So that's what the virtual device manager does. So once, oops, I've closed it. So have you guys any doubts? I'll just wait for this to open. Do you have any doubts? I mean, moving too much. I'll slow it down a little bit. Okay, so just give me a second. I just closed it by mistake. Yeah, so once you've installed your device, it will appear over here on top. Like as you can see, there's a Pixel 3 available over here. So this means that the app will run on this device. Like if I have multiple devices, then all the devices will be available over there, and you can just choose a device and just click play. It will just install the device on that app, and that specific emulator will open with that app. So that's what this menu does over here. So let's go back to shapes button. So once you have horizontally and vertically constrained this button, now if you add another button, you want that to appear below the shapes button. So your vertical constraint of this animate button should be below the shapes button. You have to just click this button over, like this pointer over here, and then just drag it to the pointer below the shapes button. So if I move it now, it will just delete the constraint. So I'll just undo it. So once I've done that, I just I'll just put 20. By default, it will be 0. So you just need to put 20, like to place it 20 pixels below the shapes button. And for left and right center, you just drag it to either side of the window, which will mean that it should be equally concentrated towards either side. And then below that, there will be a transform button. So this is what the main activity should contain. It should just contain buttons to move to the other activities. Since we have different things like we need to display some shapes, we need to display some animations, and we need to display some transformations as well. So we just need buttons over here. For the activity main activity.java file, this is where we'll be specifying the code for our UI. Like we display some UI components here, right? Like when you click this button, something should happen, right? So we'll code the logic inside main activity.java. So when you go to main activity.java, what you'll have is once you go to main activity, what you'll have is basically this public class main activity will be there, and at override public protected void on create will be there with super on create and set content view. Only these 3 lines will be there, like nothing else will be there. You need to add the code for the other things as you may. So what I need to do is first I need to get the objects for these buttons. Like I need to reference these UI components right from my code. So what I need to do is first when I just create a button, by default the ID will be button 1, button 2, button 3. It will just go on like that. If you're working in a big project, it might get difficult to remind yourself of such names. Like if it's randomly button 1 and button 2, you might not be able to remember those names clearly. So what I like to do is I like to change the ID of my components that I'm putting over here. Like so, my shapes button will be named as obviously as shapes button, animate will be animate button, transforms will be transform button. So you can change the ID as you want. So if I give some random name, it will just ask me to rename it, and I just need to give refactor. What refactor does is if I change the name somewhere, it should not like cause problems in the other parts of the code, right? Like if transform button is mentioned elsewhere in the code, it needs to change transform button to this new name. So this refactor will change every instance of transform button in my code to SDSF over here. So that's what refactor does, which basically reduces the workload for us. We need not manually change the name everywhere. And once you've done this, like as I said, you should also like probably change your layout width and height as required. You can just manually play with the values and see what's best for you. Once you've done that, you can go to the main activity, and then I need to get the references for those buttons in the UI. So what I need to do is I need to use find view by ID. You'll use this a lot. Find view by ID allows you to get the reference for a specific UI component and then instantiate it to an object. So you can just type find view by ID. And what R basically is, R is the current Android API version I'm using. So Android API version 30 is called shortly as R. So that's why you see everywhere it's labeled R.R. So basically that's what R does. And if you type R dot, it will just basically tell you what are the options available. I just need ID. So because I need to get the ID of the buttons over there. So dot, if I put dot, it will just list whatever components I have in the whole project. From that, I just want the shapes button. So I give shapes button, and then you need not type these things. You can just, if you press Alt Enter, it will just ask if you want to introduce a local variable, and you can just since I have my occurrences already, it will ask me to replace the occurrences, but that's what it does. So you need not type these things manually. But what I like to do is I like to label these things as final, because I won't be changing the object later, because shapes button object will always contain the ID of shapes button. It will not contain something else. So I'd like to put final because I don't want to change it later elsewhere. But you can avoid that if you want to. Final basically tells Java that this is the final value for this variable, and I won't be changing it later. So I'll just put final over there. And once I've defined objects for all the 3 buttons, what I need to do is I need to set events. Like if button is clicked, I need to do something, right? So I need to set on-click listeners for every one of these buttons. This is similar to what you would have done in JavaScript for HTML, like for HTML buttons and stuff like that. So for that, what I need to do is shapes button dot. I just need to press dot. Set on-click listener will come over there by default. You need not memorize anything. So if you press set on click listener, it will open bracket and close the bracket for you. And inside that, I just have to type new and space. As you can see, it's filling view dot on click listener. I just need to give enter. So it will by default specify some add override public void on click function for me. I need not type these things manually. You just need to, what we all need to do is you need to just type inside the on click function. That's all we need to do. We do not need to do anything. We do not need to modify anything else in this code. So since I already defined something, I'll just erase this. So inside on click, what I've done is, if the button is clicked, I need to move to another activity, which is shapes activity. We'll see what shapes activities later. But if I want to move from one activity to another, what I need to use is something called as an intent. Intent allows you to move from one activity to another in Android. So I need to create a new intent with the context of the first argument it takes is context. Context is basically main activity dot this, because this is the activity that we are working on right now. So I've just given main activity dot this. You can also give get application context. That is also another thing you can use, but you can also use this whatever works for you. And then what we need to do is next thing we need to specify to where we need to move to. I need to move to shapes activity. So I'm mentioning shapes activity dot class. This will load the binaries for the shapes activity class, and then it will store that in this intent. So when I mention start activity of shapes intent, this will basically start the activity and move from main activity.xml to shapes activity.xml. That's what will happen, and that code will be instantiated. So basically, we are moving from one activity to another. One activity in Android just does one job. We need to do more than one job. We need to move from one activity to another. Basically, this changes your screen from, let's say, you're trying to check out some contents in your Amazon basket. Like your orders will be in one screen. When you press place order, it will move to a screen where it's asking for your address, your payment details, and stuff like that. So those will be separate intents. So that's how we move from one part of our UI to another part in Android. So similarly, I will need to define intents for the other activities like transform activity and my what's the other one, animate activity, and then define a start event for those two activities as well. So basically, if you press the button, it will move to another activity. That's what the main function should do. It's just a driver. It shouldn't do anything else. So we can now move on to the other activities. Okay, so I'll just close these two. So we'll first start by looking at shapes activity and shapes. Okay, fine. Inside shapes, as you can see, I don't have anything because I need to draw the image. Like I don't have an image, static image displayed over here. So basically, what I've done is I've just went to the palette, selected an image view, and placed it over here. And I've just emptied the contents of the window. Like I'll explain to you what I've done. I've basically constrained the image view object vertically centered and horizontally centered. So it's basically on the center of the screen, and then usually it will just display a box with some random image in it. So if I just try to put an image view, as you can see, it's telling me to pick a resource. I don't want any resource because I am going to draw the resource, right? Like in shapes, I'm going to draw the image. I don't want a static image to be there. So, but initially you just need to select some random image from here. These are images that are by default available in Android. So once you put this image over here, what you need to do is you need to go to the image view, like you need to go to the object's attributes, and the attribute that you are looking for is src compat. If you go to src compat attribute, it will now ask you for something called as color. Like there will be a tab called as color. If you go to color, you can just select white because it matches the background. So you can just select white, it will just disappear. Now there'll be nothing displayed by default on the screen. So I just like to do this because I'm going to draw the image and I do not want a static image to be displayed over there. You can also do this via code, but it's easier to do it here. So that's it. I'm just having a static empty image over there, image object. There's nothing else. I'm going to draw the image by myself using the code. So I've just changed the ID of the object. It's called as canvas image. We have down till now, so can I move on? Okay. So now let's move on to shapes activity. So inside shapes activity, I need to first reference the canvas image that I created on the XML file. So for that, I've just given final image view as canvas image, and then what I need to do for drawing is I need to create a bitmap. You might know what is a bitmap from your graphics class. Bitmap is basically uh, an image uh, which has details for each pixel. Like it will have a red component, it will have a green component, it will have a blue component for each pixel, and it can also have an alpha component. Alpha is basically describing the translucency of the object. If an object is opaque, it will be 1. If it's transparent, it will be 0. So that's what a bitmap is. It basically specifies what pixels, what would be the pixel specification for each pixel on an image. So I'm creating a bitmap. For this, if you do not have you might not have the imports right now. Like you do not need to manually type these imports over here. Like let me just try to type something over here. Like I'll just try to introduce a log object. I do not have a log import over there, but log. I'll just explain what a log is later. So if I try to create something, some log file, and then if I just wait for here, oh, I already have a log. Okay, I already have a log over here. Let me just erase it. So I do not have the import for log over now, but as you can see, it's telling me that there's a red line over there. It's highlighted in red, which means that there's some error. So it's automatically suggesting me to do an alt enter. If I just hover over there, if I press alt enter, what will happen is it will by default fix the problem for me, which is basically adding the import. That's it. It will just add an import for me, and I do not need to add the import manually. Like you do not need to memorize any import files or import syntax. You don't need to memorize anything. You just need to remember the syntax for the bitmaps and other things. So if you go to bitmap and you just press dot, you can see the available functions over there. I just need to create a bitmap, and there are different create bitmap functions. It's an overloaded function, and you can just choose something that you want. I have just chosen something with width, height, and a configuration. I want the bitmap image to fill my entire screen. My screen's dimensions are 1080 by 1920, so I've just given 1080 by 1920. 1080 as width, 1920 as height, and the configuration for me is bitmap.config.argb888, which means that I need 8 bits for storing my alpha value, 8 bits for storing my red, 8 bits for storing my green, 8 bits for storing my blue. So it will have such a bitmap configured for me, and I'm going to set this bitmap onto my canvas image. So for that, I'm just mentioning canvas image.set image bitmap of bitmap. So what this does is it basically defines, sends the bitmap object onto the canvas image so that you can view it on the UI. I'll be manipulating this bitmap object to display my graphics. So in the bitmap object, you need to create a canvas. The canvas is something like a canvas in real life. Like if you guys have done painting, you will know that canvas is something like you mount it upon an easel and you draw using some oil colors or some paint or something like that. So similarly, canvas here is similar to that. You draw on the canvas. So canvas is equal to new canvas of the canvas should be created on the bitmap. So I'm mentioning the argument as bitmap. The bitmap is the bitmap I created earlier, and paint is to specify the pixels. Like paint object allows me to specify what kind of color I need. It just gives me color pigments for my graphics. So I'm setting my text size as 50 because I'm going to type something using onto the canvas using the draw text function. So I'm just setting the text size as 50. By default, the text size should be something like 20, which will be too small. So I'm just setting something as 50 for sake of visibility. And then I'm setting the color to magenta. Like if you go to color, if you type paint.set color, it will say that you need to specify something called as int color. You just need to hover over this. It's saying it needs an int color object or a long color variable. So what I like to do is I just like to use the existing defined colors already. There will be some colors that are already defined in the paint object by default. Sorry, color object by default. So I'll just use that. So as you can see, yellow color is defined, cyan, magenta is defined. You can also specify your own colors, which I'll tell you how to do later. So I'll just give color.magenta for now. And then inside that, after that, we have to draw the text for rectangle. So I'm just doing this function called canvas.drawText, and inside that I'm specifying the text as a rectangle, and x and y basically tells me the starting coordinate of where I want this text to appear from. So you just need to visualize this canvas in your head and try to do this, or you can just do a trial and error of displaying it wherever and just checking which coordinates work best for you. So I've specified x to be 720 and y to be 350, and I'm specifying the paint object because it takes a paint object inside its function, and this will set the attribute. It will set the color as magenta for this rectangle, and it will set the text size for this paint. Set the text size as 50 for this text value. So that's what will happen. And now I need to draw the actual rectangle, and if I hover over draw rect function, like you do not need to memorize anything. You can just see if you hover over the function signature, you can see that the IDE tells you what the function is all about. So this says that it draws a specified rectangle using the specified paint. The rectangle will be filled or framed based on the style in the paint. So it takes parameters of left, top, bottom, and right. So basically you need to specify coordinates for all those 4 points, and then you need to specify the paint object. So I'm drawing a rectangle from 700 left to 950 right. So basically the width will be 250, top and bottom will be 400 and 900. That means the height of the rectangle will be 500. I've just manually hard coded this, and I just saw what was best for my rectangle in my screen. So this was just trial and error. You need to work with that. And then I'm just specifying the paint object. Now I'll change the color to blue, and I'll draw a circle similarly. For circle, you need to specify the center of the circle. So center is Cx and Cy, the first 2 arguments. X coordinate of the center, Y coordinate of the center. Then it will take an argument for radius. Radius is I've given as 150 pixels, so it will draw a circle with 150 pixel radius. And after that, I'm drawing a line. So basically, line takes 2 arguments: the starting X coordinate, starting Y coordinate, stopping Y coordinate, and stopping Y coordinate, stopping X coordinate and Y coordinate. So basically, x1, y1, x2, y2. It will draw a line from x1, y1 to x2, y2. That's what the draw line function does. And now I'm not using a predefined color. I'm using a color that I've extracted. Like the color I've specified using hexadecimal code. So for that, I have to parse the color because this color is not available already. I need to use this function called color.parseColor, and I need to put the color string inside it. The color string you can obtain from the internet. Hexadecimal values you can obtain from the internet, like we do for CSS normally. And then I specified it as FFA500, which is basically the color code for orange. So what this will do is it will parse the color into its long format, long in the sense like long integer object, and then it will set it to that color using paint.setColor. So now it will display something in orange. So for drawing an arc, the function is a little bit weird because I need to specify a rectilinear object, or basically an oval. So for drawing an arc is basically a part of an oval, right? So I need to first instantiate an oval object. So for that I am using rectf oval is equal to new rectilinear object, and I have to specify the left, top, right, and bottom of the rectilinear object. So why is this left, right, top, and bottom? Is because the way this is specified is there's an oval and there is a rectangle surrounding the oval. So that's how this is specified. So you just need to specify the rectangle, the surrounding or bordering rectangle, like the rectangle that completely borders the oval on each side. So that's how you specify this function. It's the rectilinear object, and then using this rectilinear object, you will have to draw the arc. So for that, I'll just have to use the draw arc function. The first argument is the oval or the rectilinear object that I've created, and then I have to specify the start angle 0 degrees, sweep angle. Sweep angle means that it will sweep an angle of the specified degree. I've given it as 180 degrees, so it will sweep an angle of 180 degrees. And use center as false. It basically uses this is an argument that mentions if I need to use the oval's center as the center for this. I've set it to false because I do not want the centers to be same. You can put it as true if you want. It doesn't make a big difference. It will just change the location of the arc, I guess. So that's basically it. And then I have to specify the paint object. So do you guys want to see the demo right now, or can we finish everything and then use the demo later? What do you want? Can we see this demonstration of these objects live, or should we see this later after I finish everything? அப்புறம் பார்க்கலாம். இப்போ பார்க்கலாம். ஓகே okay fine. Okay, it will take some time to run. Anything? Okay, okay, the arguments for draw text is basically the text you want first of all, and then the x coordinate of the origin of the text being drawn. So basically the starting x coordinate, starting y coordinate, and the paint object. That's it. So for executing the Android applications, like basically it will first build an APK. APK is the Android package file. It will build that using something called as Gradle. Gradle is a build automation tool used in Java. It's also used over here. So it basically acts like NPM for, I mean, like, it acts like NPM for the synonymous, no, the analogous equivalent is NPM in JavaScript. You use NPM build, NPM install and stuff like that. You can also install packages, right? Like Node.js you can install. Similarly, here you can install Maven packages like dependencies if you want. We'll not be going into dependencies, but if you want to, you can install some other third-party dependencies, like how you install React for JavaScript. You can install some similar packages for here if you want to, if you're creating any application. So, okay, install all that. Okay, so the system has started. Just wait a second. Yeah, if everything is perfect, it will say launch succeeded over here. Otherwise, it will throw some errors, and you can view those errors in the terminal or in the problems. Sorry, not in the terminal. You can view those in the current files. Like here, just for now, I just have a warning because I'm not using that imported showing that as a warning. But otherwise, if there are errors, it will appear in red, and you might need to fix those errors. That's what this is about. Okay. I don't know why this is. Okay, my AVD is not responding for some reason. Just give me a second. Okay, basically my AVD has stopped responding. So if this happens, just don't worry. It will happen if you do not shut down the AVD properly, which I did last time. I did not shut it down properly, which was my mistake. So what I just need to do is I need to just wipe the data. Wipe the data will just erase whatever contents on it. So if I run this, it needs to install the OS again, which will take some time. But till then, we'll just see another example because this will take some time to install. So I do not want to bore you with the installation procedure over here. Like it will take some time to install. So we'll just move on to the next thing, and after I finish the next thing, we'll just see this thing. So the next one we wanted to see was transformations. Like we need to do some transformations on images. Okay. So we needed to do some transformations like zooming in, fading, and rotation on some images that we displayed on the UI. So that was what transformation was about. So what I've done is I've imported 3 images onto my UI, and I've placed it on my UI window. So what you need to do for this is, like, these images are custom images. They are not inbuilt like the images that come with Android by default. So to add new images, if you just go to image view, like this object, and if you go to src compat, these images will not be available by default. Like I have imported this, right? Like these are custom images. So what you need to do to import images like this is, you need to go to project. Once you go to project, you will see this directory tree structure. Inside the directory tree structure, you go to the res folder, This is where you will place all your XML and the other contents, assets for your project. Inside the REST folder, you will find something called as drawable. Inside drawable, if you right click the drawable folder, okay. Inside the drawable folder, if you go to new and if you go to image asset or vector asset, you can import SVG files or PNG or JPG files onto your Android project. So I have SVG files, so I just gave import vector asset. So I just need to go and find the image from my local system. So I have it somewhere in my downloads folder. So I've just imported it just like that. And then if I just give next, it will just import it. That's all we have to do to import an image. Without importing the image like this, you cannot use the image on your UI component. Like you cannot copy paste an image from the internet, let's say from the internet to somewhere in this UI component. You can just cut and paste stuff like that. That won't work. You need to import it manually like this. Because the Android project, like the project should be self-sustainable. Like it should not contain external components. Everything that relates to the project must be present inside the project folder. So once you've done that, you can go to the SRC Compat, and now you'll be able to find the custom images that you imported. This is my app name, and you'll say graphics.app. It has these 5 images. So I just chose this image. Similarly, I have 2 other images as well. I've constrained it like how I've constrained it in my other example, like the other XML file. So what I'll be doing is I'll be rotating this. I'll be rotating this refresh syncing image, and the dollar image I'll be fading, and this star image I'll be zooming in and out. So that's what I want to do. So the UI part is done. This is entirely the UI. So okay, the application has come online. So let me go to shapes and show you how the demo looks like. So this is how it looks like. I don't know if you're able to make sense of it, but that's basically it. So this is the arc. The orange color thing is the arc. Below that is a circle, rectangle, square, and a line. You might not be able to see the line in the main screen, but it's visible over here. Like it's a very thin line. So the place where these things occur is basically has to do with the way you specify the coordinates over here. Like how you specify x and y, it will appear on the position like exactly like that. You might need to play around with the values a little bit to get the appropriate spacing and basically the way you want the images to be displayed on the screen, but I cannot teach you how to do that. You need to have some experience and try it out for yourself. Fine. Can I move on to the demonstration? Okay. So for the transform activity, we finish the UI, finish building the UI. So we need to go to the coding part right now. So I'll go to transform activity. So similarly, I've created objects for the sync image, the star image, and the dollar image using find view by ID. And now I have to do an animation, right? So for an animation, you need to specify the different parameters to an animation using XML, which I'll tell you how to do. And then you have to import the animation from XML onto an animation object, and then start the animation using the object. So first of all, we'll see how the XML looks like. So to specify an animation XML, you need to go to REST folder. Inside REST folder, you need to create something called as an anim folder. This anim folder will not be available there by default. So you need to go to new, and you need to go to directory. Inside new directory, you can just give the name as anim. So it will create an anim directory for you. And inside this, you can just create 3 XML files. I've just created 3 XML files like fade, rotate, and zoom. You see the process is similar. You just go to new, and you can also choose animation resource file if you want, or you can just give an XML. Either thing works. Use animation resource file because it will be simpler. It will create these 2 lines for you, I guess. So basically, that just specifies the XML version and the syntax that you want inside. Like it's a set with some Android the XML specification. And basically, what you want to do is you need to do a fading, right? Fading is specified by the alpha XML object. So alpha specifies fading. So inside alpha, you need to type And like you need not remember these things. Like if you type Android and if you give colon, it should technically autofill them, but it's not autofilling. If you type something, it should autofill it. I don't know why it's not happening right now. Okay, so it should autofill. I think my internet is low, that's why it's not autofilling. So basically, you need to specify from alpha to alpha, which basically says from what level of transparency to what level of transparency you want to move. So I'm starting at 0, which is completely blank image, like the image will be completely invisible, and to the 2 alpha I'm specifying it as 1, which means that the object will be completely opaque, and the duration through which I want this to happen is 2000 milliseconds, which is basically 2 seconds. So it will move from the object will animate from 0 transparency to complete opaqueness in 2 seconds. And I want this to repeat infinitely, so I am giving a repeat count as infinite. And the repeat mode is reverse. So what will happen is it will go from 0 to 1 and it will come back from 1 to 0. That's what will happen if you give repeat mode as reverse. There's also another argument instead of reverse that you can give. I think that is called something. Yeah, there's also something called as restart. What restart does is it will go from 0 to 1 and again it will go from 0 to 1. Reverse now it will go from 0 to 1 and then it will reverse the animation that you did priorly. So I have just given reverse bit because it looks pleasing to the eye. So you can specify or not specify it if you want to. That's your wish. So this completes the fading XML part. Similarly, now we'll go to rotate. For rotate, you need to specify rotate XML object. Inside rotate, it will take the arguments from degrees, like the rotation, the initial rotation, like what's the degree you want to start from, and till what, like it's the sweep angle that we saw in the rectilinear object. So similarly, from degrees 0 to 360. So it will rotate the object from 0 to 360 degrees. And pivot basically says what's the pivot point, like I want it to be 50% pivoted to X and 50% pivoted to Y. You can read them. You can read about the specification if you hover over it. So X coordinate of the center of rotation of a group. So that's it. So the duration I want it as 4 seconds. And again repeat count is infinite and repeat mode is restart. So it will go from 0 to 360, 360 to 0. So it'll just keep rotating like that. And similarly, for zoom, it's scale. The transformation is called scale, the scale object. And for this, I'm specifying the duration as again 2000. Starting scaling is 1, 1. So X scale will be initially 1 and Y scaling will be initially 1. So basically, that means that it will start from the default scaling and it will move towards scaling to, like I've given two X scale as 2 and 2 Y scale as 2, as you can see in these 2 lines. So it will move from 1, 1 scaling to 2, 2 scaling. It will scale by a factor of 2. You can also give differential scaling if you want to. I've just given uniform scaling. And again, pivot X and pivot Y I've specified as 50%. And similarly, I've given repeat count as infinite and repeat mode as reverse. So it'll just keep, it will zoom from 1 to 2 and it will back from 2 to 1. So that's what will happen with zoom. So once I've specified these XMLs for the animation, I need to go back to the transform activity. And inside transform activity, to convert this XML into the appropriate Java object, like the animation object, you need to use animation utils library. So animation util, if you have to import this animation utils, like I have imported it already, so it appears. If you just type animation utils and it's highlighted in red, means you do not have the import, so you can just press Alt Enter and import it. Since I've already imported it, it's appearing in proper color. So I just need to press dot and then I'll wait for the inbuilt methods to appear. So inside that I need to load the animation. That's what I need to do. So I'll go to load animation and I'll load the animation. So inside load animation I need to specify 2 arguments. The first one is the application context, which is basically transform activity.this. Instead of transform activity.this, I can use get application context also. The 2 are interchangeable. So I'll just use get application context. And the animation that I want here is rotate animation, so that you need to specify using r.anim.rotate. So R, because the Android API level is 30, it's R, it's called as R, and it's inside the anim folder, so it's r.anim.rotate. It needs to be in this specific structure. You cannot put the animation in some other folder and expect it to work like this. It should be in the anim folder. And then if I just remove this part, Like you do not need to type the rotate animation by yourself. My mouse is a bit here. It's okay. So if I just give Alt Enter, it will say to introduce a local variable, and it will just introduce animation for me. I can just change the name if I want to. So I'll just change it to rotate animation. I think the spelling is okay. I'll just confirm. Yeah. So now I need to start this animation on some object. So the object that I want to rotate is a sync image. Sync image is the image view of the refresh icon image. So inside the sync image, I need to give sync image dot start animation, and I need to specify the rotate animation inside it. So this will start the animation of the rotation onto the sync image. Similarly, for the star image, I need to do the zoom, and for the dollar image, I need to do fading. So that's what the transform activity does. This has all to do with transform activity. We can also try out some other transformations, but this is what we needed to do for the exercise. So I just completed this. If you have any other doubts relating to the transformations, like we need to go over something else. Fine. Scale alpha for fading, and the other one was I think rotate. So we'll see the demo of how it looks. If I press transform, you can see that it's your first one is rotating, the second one is fading from 0 to 1, and the last one, the star, is zooming in and out from 1 to 2. So it's repeating infinitely and it's going in reverse each time. So it has how to do it basically does the transformation as how I'm specifying it in the XML. So that has all to do with transformations. So that's basically it. So now we'll move towards the animations. So for animation, we were supposed to draw a car or import a car image or whatever, and then animate the car from. The car should go from left to right. So I basically drew the car myself. We can also import the car, I think, but I don't know. I just drew the car myself. Since I drew the car myself, similarly I have inside the canvas, and like I do not have any component inside the UI window. I just have an empty image, similar to how I created it for shapes activity, because I'm going to draw everything myself. So the UI is only this much. There's nothing else. So now we'll see the Java code for the same thing. So I'm just getting the reference for the canvas animate object. Canvas animate is basically this image view, and then I'm just creating a paint object and bitmap similarly, and then I'm setting the bitmap to the canvas animate image, and then I'm setting the canvas to the bitmap. So now I'll be drawing two cars. So the first car I'm specifying it with color green, which basically this thing, the rectangle draws the car's body. The yellow thing, which this rectilinear arc, is basically the roof of the car. This is basically a rudimentary car. Don't expect high quality graphics or something. So the next one is basically two circles for the wheels of the car. Similarly, I've drawn another car. So those are two cars that I've drawn. So I've just seen what works for my coordinates. Well, like the coordinates are just, as I've said previously, you need to try and test what looks good on your screen. So I cannot teach you how to do that. So for the next part, we need to animate this object. Like the car needs to move from left to right, or basically right to left, or whatever. So the animation that I have done is the car moves from right to left, and then it comes back from left to right. So this will keep on repeating. So and that's the animation that I have specified for over here. So for that, what you need to do is you need to. Here I'm not using any XML. I'm just specifying everything in Java. So for that, I'm using the object animator of object or class, object animator class. Inside that offload, there's something called as an offload, which returns an object animator that animates between float values. So it takes an argument of a float value, and it performs an animation from the specified float value to the specified float value on a specified target. You can read about the functions a Java doc when you hover over it for better understanding. And the object that I want to animate is the canvas animate, which is basically my image. And the property that I want to modify is the x, like the x coordinate. I want to modify the x coordinate. So the value I'm giving is 800. So it will move towards 800. Like from the current position, it will translate. I mean, it will move towards 800. Like it will move 800 units from the initial position. It will animate 800 units. So this animation will occur in 2000 milliseconds, which is basically 2 seconds. So I'm just setting a duration. Object animator object is the animate car. So now I have to specify the animation using an animator set. Animator set animation is new animator set, and inside the animator set, I'll be specifying the animation that I want to do. Like the object animator will go inside the animation object. So animation, this is for reversing. So what I'm doing here is animation dot play this first animation dot before, like do this animation before doing the animation that I'm specifying here. The second animation is object animator dot offload canvas animate, property name is x again to 0. So this will go from the current position to 800 and it will go back from 800 to 0. So this is what is done for reversing. Like I'm going from the starting position to 800 and then from 800 I'm coming back to 0. So for this I'm setting the duration as 2000 again. So what will happen here is, like this specifies the animation sequence. The animator set specifies the sequence of the animation. So first it will animate the first animation which is going forward, and then it will do the animation of reversing, that is coming back from right to left. So to loop this animation indefinitely, because this animation will just do it once and then stop it. If I just start the animation once, to loop it indefinitely, I need to use a listener. Basically, how you have an event listener for on click and on hover, something like that. So similarly, you have listeners for animation. So animation dot add listener will add a listener, and inside this will auto fill the stuff. You do not need to change anything over here. If you just type new, it will just highlight this. It will just specify the animator listener adapter suggestion for you. Like it will auto suggest that, and you just need to press enter, and it will fill this add override on animation end for you. So inside that, what you need to do is first you need to specify the constructor. Like super means that it will go to the super class, and on animation end of animation, that it means that the animation has ended. And now on the animation's end, I need to restart the animation. So what the function does is, like like the listener is listening for the animation's ending event. If the animation has ended, it will again start the animation. So animation.start appears again. So this will basically loop the thing again and again. So once the animation is started, it will sometime end. Once it's ending, this add listener will fire, and then the animation will start again. So this goes on indefinitely. So animation is started using, I need to trigger the animation initially for the first time. So I'm just giving animation.start. This will start the animation for the first time, and this will take care of looping it indefinitely. This part of code from line 65 to 71. So I'll show you the demo over here. So animate. So as you can see, the two cars are moving forward and backward. It's appearing a bit weird on the screen, but it's proper in my phone. So as you can see, it's just moving forward and backward. And that's it with the animation activity. Do you have any other doubts with respect to animation? Okay, if you are good with animation, then we can move to the next exercise. Before that, if you want, you can take a break or something. If you want. Okay, the next exercise we are going to see is the fourth exercise, which has to do with database. This is a huge exercise, so I may not be able to cover everything in detail. So first, I'll explain the theory of how databases work in Android. We cannot have a full-fledged SQL implementation in Android because, as you know, Android is a mobile device. You cannot have a full-fledged implementation because SQL takes up a lot of process memory, and it needs to be always running in the background. So if you have a full-fledged SQL running, it might end up draining your battery very early. And in a mobile device, power is everything, so you need to conserve power. So for that, instead of SQL, we go to SQLite, which is like a minified version of SQL. I'll show what SQLite is in theory. from this book. This book I had sent to you in the class group a couple of days earlier. You can just go through it on your own. But for now, I'll just explain the theory from this. So now we look at what SQLite is. So yes, I'm assuming everyone can read this, but even otherwise I'll be reading it out. So shouldn't be a problem. So SQLite database is lightweight. It does not. It is just a file. It basically SQLite is basically just a .db file. It is not an SQL implementation. When you're not using the SQLite database, it does not use up any processor time. So that way you're saving up battery power. We do not want to drain battery. That's what they're also saying. So and also it's optimized for a single user. In Android, since you're the only person who's going to be using the device, it will be optimized for your own device. Unlike SQL implementations, where you can log into multiple users, where each user might have different permissions available on each database or table. Like someone might be able to edit the data, and someone might be able to edit the table, while someone else can only be able to view the table. So those kind of permissions will be of less use here because you are going to be the only person who's using it, and it's also stable and fast because it's written in C. Like SQLite is a SQL implementation written in C, so it's amazingly fast and it's also stable. It also reduces the amount of processor power it needs because it's written in C. So that's basically what SQLite is in a nutshell. And now we'll move on to like we do not need to know where it's stored right now because it's not really helpful. You can read about that later if you want. But how we use this SQLite SQLite database in our Android code is basically using an SQLite helper class. An SQLite helper is basically a wrapper class that helps you manage your SQLite database. So the SQLite helper helps you create and manage databases using the SQLite open helper class. SQLite database is the object which is similar to an SQL connection in JDBC, and cursor is similar to a result set in JDBC. A cursor allows you to read and write tables or columns from the tables in the different databases. So these are the three things you need to remember: SQLite helper, SQLite database, and a cursor. So after this, we'll move on to how to create the database. For creating the database, first we need to create the SQLite helper class, and then we need to populate it with stuff. I think we'll see this creating the database. When you first install an app, the database file will not be existent. So the SQLite helper class creates the database for you with the correct name and table structures. And to get access to the database via the code, the SQLite helper class helps us with database objects, which help us to access the tables from our code. So basically, this is like a butler for us. That's why they're using a butler image. The SQLite helper is a butler that helps us to manage our SQL stuff. To create an SQLite helper class, you need to extend the class using SQLite open helper class. I'll show that to you in code, and for that, it will by default we must override the functions of onCreate and onUpgrade methods. OnCreate will create the database. OnUpgrade will upgrade the database if you already have an existing database. So I'll show you what those mean a little bit later. Okay, I think we are ready to move into the code. Okay, fine. Okay, I'll show you the code right now. So this is the helper class that we need to define. Like we need to create this helper class. This won't be available by default, and we need to go to the Java file com.example.employee manager, the package, and inside that I need to go and create a new Java class. So I need to give a name. I can give any name. I'll just give an employee database helper because it makes sense for me. You can give any other name you want. So inside once you open this employee database helper, it will have public class employee database helper. It will not have this extends SQLite open helper by default. You need to write the extends SQLite open helper, and once you do that, the entire thing will be highlighted in red because you will be missing some imports, and you will be missing this function that need to be overridden. So if you press Alt Enter, it will just import those packages for you, import those libraries for you, and it will also create this add override public on create and add override public on void on upgrade. Those function signatures will be written for you. You do not need to write them manually. And first of all, you need to declare your database name and the database version. For that, I'm using a private static final string database name employees. It's final because I do not want to change the database name, and it's static because there needs to be only one instance of this DB name, and private because I do not need to. I should not be able to access this variable outside this class. It should only be pertaining to this class. And the database version is 1 because why not? It's the first version. And the next one is the constructor. The constructor, inside the constructor, will specify the context, public employee database helper context. Context will be the current class's context. So you can just mention context, and inside that you will just call the superclass. Superclass will be the SQLite open helper because that's how we've defined the extends relationship. So inside the super, we will take an argument of context. We can just mention the context as the variable here. DB name, it will take the DB name as employees. This is a factory variable. This is by default null. What this factory basically is this is an advanced parameter that relates to cursors. We do not need them right now, so I've just left it as null for now. DB version is 1 from here. Context, it's basically the current class that the Android device is currently working on. My main activity is the context is main activity class. So we do not know what the context will be, like many applications will be. So I just specify context as context. It will take the context from whatever process is currently running. So another context specify பண்ணா போதும். So now on create, on upgrade, we need to change it mandatorily. You can leave it empty, but leaving it empty is pointless because we need to create the tables. Like on create will create the database, and it will also create some instances for us. You can also populate the table with some rows and rows of data if you want. You can also create multiple tables because we need only one table for now, and the user is going to be populating every data. I'm just creating the table for now. So for creating a table, you need to use this SQLite database DB will by default be present in the constructor. So you need to just do db.exec SQL. Exec SQL will execute the SQL statement inside it, which is basically a string. Create table if not exists. So if the table is already existing, do not create it. That's what the if not exist does. This is basically SQL syntax. It's the table name is employees, and then I'm giving employee code as a text, and it's also the primary key. Name is a text, gender is a text, department is a text, salary is a numeric. There are different data types available. As you can see here, there is an integer data type, there is a text data type, there is a real data type, there is numeric, which can store booleans, dates and date times. There is also a blob, which is a binary large object, which can store some binary data like images and stuff. We'll just be dealing with text and numeric for now because that's what we need. On upgrade, like if there's already a table that's existing, you need to drop the existing table and just call the old method. Like you just drop the existing table and create the new table. Basically, if you're just this on upgrade function is not much use to us because like we have only one version of the app. Like this helps us because if let's say you have installed your app, like the employee manager app is installed. Now if a user has installed it and is doing some work with it, he'll already have the database, right? So now if I'm releasing a new update to my software, now the database instance will already be existing. I should not be creating the table from scratch because it's already there. The onCreate function will not be called because it's already existing. So at that point, what I need to do is I need to upgrade the existing table. Like if there are any changes to be made to the software, I need to just call the onUpgrade function. Like if the table is already, the database is already existing, I just call the onUpgrade function. It will be called by default, and it will create a new create the changes if any. I don't have any changes, so I've just dropped the existing table and created a new table. But you do not need to even type this out. This is not really necessary. And we'll go into add record, retrieve record a little bit later because I'll first of all explain the syntax for the other applications, like for the other UI components and intents, other stuff first, and then we'll move on to this part. So that's it for database right now. We'll go back to this a little bit later. Okay, fine. So inside main activity, like once you create the project, you will by default have a main activity and main activity main XML, like we saw in the last example. Inside activity main, again you will be having only the buttons for the other activities. Like if you click create, the database should be created, but that does not make sense because the employee database, once you call the employee database helper, like the database will be created. So this actually serves no purpose. Do not need it. Insert, once you create it, once you click insert, it should move to an activity where it will get user details and then insert that record. And similarly, update, delete, and retrieve by department is present. So these are just buttons. You will just constrain them left and right and vertically constrain them to the label above and stuff like that. We saw that earlier. The label is basically a text view. Inside the text view, I can change the. I've just changed the font here. Like I've given a font as Caligostro. You can import and use fonts if you want to. That's not necessary, but if you want, you can use any fonts. I've also changed the text color and I've changed the text as well. So text size I've changed to 34 sp and the text style is bold. I can even give italics or some other stuff if I want to, like I've shown in previous example. And the width and height is not static here. It should wrap the content. Basically, wrap content means that whatever content is inside it, it should take that much width and that much height. So that's what wrap content is. You can just give wrap content for UI components that will change its height and width, specifying according to the contents that might be inside them. So I've just given wrap content here. And those are the attributes that I've mentioned. You can align the text also if you want to. I've not done anything like that. Other than that, for the buttons, I would have changed the background tint. Like the button color is different. So how do you change the button color? Is using the background tint attribute. If you go to background tint of the button, if you can choose any color you want to, or you can also import any color. I've just chosen the color that's predefined. So I've chosen the hollow red light color. There are also other colors available. So this is the background tint property. And that's it for the activity main XML. So for activity for the code part, you just need to move to the other activities using the intents as we've done in the earlier example. So for that, I'm just referencing the buttons that I've created in my UI: create button, insert button, update button, delete button. Similarly, all buttons I've created, and you need to call this employee database helper wherever you're wanting to use it. Okay, so let me just close this. Okay, so how do you call this? Is by using new employee database helper of this new. You just need to type. You don't need to type everything over here. You just need to type the employee. You just need to instantiate this object. So you can just do new employee database helper. This is the class that you have given. Like employee database helper is the file name that I have given over there. That's the class name. So context will be this. So Vishal asked me what the context means earlier. So context in this example is main activity dot this. So I can give this or main activity dot this. So that it will just take a context value because that is the constructor that you have defined. And if you just press Alt Enter, it will ask you to introduce a local variable. Just introduce a local variable. And since I already have an occurrence below, it's asking me to replace an occurrence, which I don't want to do. So I just erase this part. So it will create an object of SQLite open helper. It's final because I do not want to change this variable later. So for creating, since it's not really necessary to create it because the SQLite open helper will create it for us, we just need to instantiate the object. If you instantiate the object, the database will be created for us. We do not need to do anything else. But for the sake of understanding or whatever, like to do something, I've just gotten a readable database over here. Like using employee database helper, there is an inbuilt method called as get readable database. It will get a readable instance of the database for us, and then I'm just storing it to an SQLite database DB. That's what I'm doing. So basically, if this thing doesn't run, like if this shows an error, like I have to embed all these SQL statements inside try catch block, like you might have done it on your other Java experiments using SQL. Like you would have done servlets and you would have done some stuff in DBMS like the last experiment. Similarly, you would have put it inside a try catch block and an SQL exception. Similarly, for an SQL exception, instead of SQL exception, you would put SQLite exception because you're using SQLite databases. So SQLite DB, we need to put those statements inside try catch blocks, and if there's an error, if the database is not readable for some reason, it will show an error. So for that, I'm using a toast. Toast is basically like a notification that appears on the bottom of your screen for a specific while, like it will appear for 5 seconds or 10 seconds or so, and will just disappear, just for informing the user of something like a notification. Like so that's what use a toast for. So toast is equal to toast.make_text. It'll make the text. The context will be main activity of this again. The text will be database created, and I want it to appear for a short while, so I'm using toast.length short. You can also use your own custom time over here, like in milliseconds. And similarly, if there's an exception for some reason, it will show database unavailable. You need to mention toast.show for the toast to be actually displayed to the user via the UI. So that's what this does. This is actually not necessary. I've just done it for the sake of understanding. So for insert button, I need to call the insert activities intent. So I'm just creating an intent for the insert activity, and the context is main activity.this. I can also use a get application context, so I'm using it interchangeably, and I'm calling the insert activity.class, and I'm starting the insert intent activity using start activity function. Similarly for update button, similarly for delete button, similarly for retrieve and retrieve by department. So that's all we need to do in the main activity.java and main activity.xml. So once you've done this, you can wrap this up. We'll move on to insert activity, and then we'll check some other stuff. We'll see retrieve activity, and I'll explain to you how SQL works for the other stuff because we are short on time. Okay, we'll move to the design of the insert activity. Okay, this is cool. Okay, so for insert record, I need to get input from the user for employee code, for name, for gender, for department and salary. So these are different UI components over here. So the first one is called, if you go to palette and if you go to text, you can see text view. Text view is like basically a label. You cannot, the user cannot enter the stuff into the label. So that's basically read only. If you want the user to enter something, you should use a plain text. Plain text will basically give a user a full-fledged keyboard. Like if the user presses on it, he'll get a keyboard. Like I'll show you an example. If I go to the insert activity and if I press this, you can see that there's a full-fledged keyboard appearing over there. Like there's a full QWERTY keyboard appearing over there. Because it's a string value, like it should be E1024. So I just given it as plain text. If you want only numbers, you can use there's a number, like similarly in like plain text there's something called as a number. You can use that component instead, and you just need to drag and drop and constrain it. I've also specified, you can see something called as E1024 like appearing as a hint. The properties obviously called as hint, like you can mention it so that it the user knows what to enter inside that. So the hint I've given as E1024 for example. Hint is an attribute. Similarly, again for name, it will be similarly plain text. For gender, you want radio buttons. For radio buttons, basically you will just select one radio button. You will not select all radio buttons. The logic is basically you want only one radio button to be selected. But by default, Android does not know all that. If you just put radio button components inside it, the user will be able to select all radio buttons. So for selecting only one radio button, you need to first use a radio group. You need to put a radio group component inside it. So if you go to the palette and search using the search icon, you can type radio and you'll get radio group and radio button. First, you just drag and drop the radio group and just make it a little bit bigger. So this is my radio group over here in the component tree. As you can see, I have something called as gender radio group 3. So this is my radio group, and inside that I can put my radio buttons. Like these are my radio buttons. I can just drag and drop these radio buttons onto my radio group, or I can just if you have it outside this, like you will have different components here. You can just drag. If the male radio button is outside this gender radio group, you can just drag it inside. So it will go inside it. So I have just put 3 radio buttons inside it. This means that these 3 radio buttons, male, female and other, are now part of the gender radio group. And since it's now part of a radio group, only one radio button can be selected at a time. You cannot select all 3 radio buttons. Only one can be selected. So now I'll show you the attributes for the radio button. I just mentioned the height and width. Width will be height will be 70 dB and width will be wrap content. You can also specify something else if you want. But since I specified the outer radio groups height, I would have not mentioned this. Like as you can see, the height for this is also wrap content. So now I am just specifying the text size as 16 and the typeface is normal. I have not given any bold or anything. You can give that if you want to. Similarly for female and other, I've just changed the IDs for every one of these things for easily keeping track of what is what. If I don't give this, it will be radio button 1, radio button 2, and it will be difficult for me to understand. So just change the IDs of everything for your own understanding. For example, this is name text, this will be M code text, and similarly. And for department, we want it to be a drop down menu. For drop down menu, there is a component called as a spinner. If you go to palette, you can find something called as a spinner. The spinner allows you to make a drop down menu. First, you need to drag and drop the spinner onto your UI, and then what you need to do is it will take something an argument called as entries. Entries basically define what values are going to be populated inside this drop down menu. So for entries, by default it will not have anything. We need to specify, since I am going to be using departments, I need to specify like there's going to be a department called as management, there's going to be a department called as a legal and auditing, there's going to be a department called as marketing. I need to specify these values. They will not be present in Android by default, and I cannot manually type these things inside this component. Like I need to specify it somewhere else. I'll show you how to do that right now. So for specifying this string array, what you need to do is you need to go to your directory structure and you need to go to res. Inside res, you can see something called as values. Inside values, there will be something called as strings.xml. If there is not a strings.xml, you just create one. But by default, it will be there. Inside strings.xml, you need to go and create a string array with some name. You can give any name you want. I've given departments as the name. And inside that, I'm populating it with items such as management, technical, marketing, so and so. And then I'm closing the string array. So this will define a string array for me, and I'll be using the string array to populate my spinner. I have to do it this way. There is no other way to populate the spinner. I need to do it this way. I have to go to strings.xml and I need to type a string. I need to define a string array with some name, and I need to insert whatever items I want into it. So once I have defined this, I need to go to the entries attribute again. As you can see, there will be already some predefined arrays for you, like email address types is there. These are some things Android provides you by default. There are some protocols like Windows Live, Yahoo, Skype and all. If you want to, you can use them, but since we are not using them, we will not be using that. What if you define something by yourself, it will appear over here like called as under employee manager. That is my app name. So inside that I have defined a string array, so it appears over here as departments. So I'll just click this and click OK. So this will populate my drop down menu with the entries over here. Like there is also another spinner mode called as dialog, which will give you a dialog box. We do not want a dialog box, we want a drop down menu. So I'll just give it by default as drop down. The default thing is drop down. If I want to, I can modify it to a dialog, but by default it's drop down. So we'll move on. For salary, it will be a number value. So I'll be using the number text. Like it will be a number, so I'll be using the number thing. I'll just drag and drop that. So now we've defined the entire UI for our insert record. I'll be handling the employee code, name, gender, department, salary. So these details the user needs to enter. So now we'll move on to the insert activity. I need to get the references for those objects one by one and put them inside variables and declare them as final. Declaring them as final is optional. If you want, you can do it. And similarly, I need to create an employee database helper object to manage my database activities. And again, the context is this. This now here means that this refers to the insert activity because we are now inside insert activity. The context is insert activity. So now when the user clicks this button, the record needs to be added, right? So I need to do add button.set on click listener, and similarly these things will be auto build. New view on click listener will be auto build. Like if you just hover over it, and then this auto override public void on click will be there by default. You just need to type inside it, and you need to get the values from the UI components one by one. So for that, I need to reference these variables these objects that I use to store my UI components. So mcode text refers to the mcode text UI component that I created over here. Similarly, name text will refer to that component, and so on. So first, mcode text.get text will get whatever text is inside the mcode text box, and then it will convert that to a string, and I'll store it inside an employee code string called as ecode. Similarly, I'm getting it for ename, and for radio button, since it's part of a radio group, first I need to obtain the ID of whatever radio button is selected. So for that, I'll use gender radio group dot get checked radio button ID. So that will get the ID of the radio button that is currently selected. So that will be an int value. IDs are usually int values. And then department, I need to get it from the spinner. So dep spinner dot get selected item. Get selected item by default returns an object. So you need to typecast it to a string. So I'm explicitly typecasting it to a string. So that's what I'm doing over here. And then salary, again I'm storing the salary as a string, but if you want to, you can change it to an integer using integer.parseInt if you want, but I'm not doing it. But if you want, you can do it. Now I need to check if these records are, these values are empty, or like I need to perform some validity checking, right? Like employee code should be E1024, E1025, it should not be F1025. So these validity checks should be done. So for that, first I'm checking if the employee code is empty. If for that I'm using the textutils library. If textutils dot is empty of employee code, then that means that the e code value is empty. So what I need to do is I need to display a toast message to the user that the employee code cannot be empty, and that's it. I'm just showing it to the user. Else if e name is empty, similarly the name is empty, name cannot be empty. Similarly, if salary is empty, salary cannot be empty. Similarly, if the first character of the employee code is not E, employee code should be starting with an E. Must be of the format E1024, so something like that. And then if the name contains some numeric characters, I'm using a regex to do that. You might be familiar with regex from your Unix and web development classes. The syntax is similar. /d refers to a decimal. So dot star // it can contain anything. If it contains a decimal in between followed by anything after that, so that's what this regex means. And then basically it just checks if there's a decimal in our string. If there is a number, then display employee name must contain only alphabets, no other characters must be allowed. And if radio button is not selected, like if we got this gender radio group get checked radio button ID, right? Like this will get the ID of whatever radio button was selected. If a radio button was not selected, this ID will be 0 or less than 0. IDs of selected radio buttons will be greater than 0. So if this thing is less than 0, if the selected radio button ID is less than 0, that means that nothing was selected. So it means that the gender radio button is not selected. So I need to tell the user that please identify your gender. That's it. So if every one of these validity check passes, it will come to the else statement. Inside the else, I need to get the value of the radio button, right? Like I have the ID of the radio button, but what I need is the value of the radio button. Like if the ID is 100, of the radio button's ID is 100, the value 100 is meaningless to me. What I want is the value of 100, which will be male or female or something. So I need to get the value. For that, I am using. I just need to first find the radio button object. So for that, gender radio group dot find view by ID of selected radio button ID. This will return the radio button object that was selected, and then inside that, using the selected radio button object, I will use get text dot toString. So it will go to the radio button object and it will get the text of the radio button object and will convert that to string and will give it to me, and I'll store it inside the string gender. And similarly, I had the salary value as the string previously. Now I'm converting the salary to a double value. So double dot parse double of salary value. This is why I've done this conversion over here. Like conversion over here instead of above there. If I did double dot parse double over here, if the string value was empty, it will not convert anything. Like it will throw an error. Like nothing is inside it. What do you expect me to convert? It will throw an error. So it won't work properly. So first you need to check if the value is not null. and it's a number. So for that, I'm just checking if the salary is null. Like if the salary is empty, it will not be converted properly, right? So I'm just checking if it's empty. First of all, I'm not checking whether this has to be a number because since here, like in the activity insert, I've given a number one. I've given the component here as a number. I cannot enter an alphabet over here. So that's an advantage for us. We not need to manually check if it has only numbers or not using regex. So that's another thing. And now I need to add this record. So to add this record, I've defined an add record function in my employee database helper class, which I'll show it to you in a minute. So now I just need to call that function employee database helper dot add record, and I need to pass all these values: employee code, employee name, gender, department, and salary. And if it's inserted, I am displaying a toast card with a message: the employee code's record was added. Otherwise, if there is some exception, this is not. I'm just printing the error message. E.getMessage will tell me the error message of what went wrong. For example, if since the employee code is a primary key, if I try to if I already have a record with E1024, if I try to add another record with E1024, it will not add it because the primary key constraint is violated. It will throw that error. Primary key constraint is violated. I cannot insert this record. So that failure message will show over here and the record will not be inserted. So we'll see what add record function is. Add record function is something that I have to define by myself. I've defined it over here because I like to keep everything related to the database in my employee database helper itself. I can have it in some other place also if I want to, but if you keep it here, it's easier to maintain. So it's a public void function because I'm not going to return anything. Add record, it will take the arguments, employee code, name, gender, department, and salary. So first, I need to get a database instance. This database instance needs to be writable and not readable. If it's a readable instance, I cannot write into the database using a readable instance. So first I need to get this dot get a writable database because I'm going to write into it. So now I'm going to store this into a SQLite database object called as DB. So this gives me an object which is a writable database object, SQLite database object. So now to put values into this, I need to use something called as content values. Content values is basically like a key value store. You use to put values into your query. So what you do is content values record is equal to new content values, create an object of it, and then record dot put e code like this, these values: e code, name, gender, department, salary. E code, name, gender, department, salary, and then these are the keys. The values will be employee code, the e code that you got from the function called the name, gender, department, and salary, and then I'm using a function called of DB. Like if you go to DB and press dot, it will list you all the available functions over there. There's a function for delete, there's a function for update, there's a function for executing raw SQL statements, there's a function called insert. The difference between insert and insert or throw is insert will try to insert, and if it's not able to insert, it will not return anything. Like insert will return an integer value of how many records were inserted. If it is 0, that means no records are inserted. But I do not want to have that. What I want to have is if a record is not inserted, I want an error to be thrown. So to throw an error, I am using the insert or throw function. So what that will do is instead of returning the number of records that are inserted or something, if something goes wrong, it will throw the error. The error will be caught in my insert activity over here. Catch SQLite exception E. So that will catch the error which was thrown by the insert activity. So that's why I'm using insert or throw to identify whether or not I've successfully inserted my data. Otherwise, I need to get, if I use db.insert, I need to pass this, instead of returning void, I need to return the int. So, let's say it will be something like this. Int text will be db.insert or throw, and then I'll return the text, which will say how many records were inserted. If the inserted records were 0, that means nothing was inserted. So I'll again display an exception. But this is much more straightforward, so I'm using this. db.insert or throw. The table I'm using is employees table. So first I'll specify that. If you hover over the insert or throw function, it will show you the entire Java doc. You can understand using that. I don't want a null column hack, so I'm just leaving it as null. You can just leave it as null. You can go through what that means later. And the record I want to insert is the content values record. So I'm just putting this content values record object into the next thing. So this will basically insert the record for me. And once I'm done with the operation, I just need to close the DB. So db.close. That's it. That's what the add record function does. Similarly, for retrieve records, what I need to do is I need to specify XML, I mean the UI first. The UI here will be uh, the user needs to enter what employee code's record he wants. So employee code only should be inputable by the user. So the user must enter the E10, like the employee code alone. The other things will be just simple text views, which will be empty. It will not have anything inside it because I'm going to populate the text views string values from my Java side. So the user just needs to enter the employee code and just press fetch. If he presses fetch and there's a record, they'll be populated in these text view values. So I'm just changing the values for the sake of my understanding. Like I'm changing the IDs import text view, and similarly this will be gender text views, and similarly, and I'll just empty the text value. As you can see, the text value is empty, and I have just specified the width as 230 to be uniform. Like you can specify any width, or if you do not specify, it will be empty. Like if I just leave it alone, it will just be shrunk and you will not be able to see. Like you will forget whether if you included the text view or not. It will be difficult to identify from your UI side. So it's better to give some default width so that you can see an empty box at least. And all these widths will be uniform. So I have given 230 as my width. And then what needs to happen in my this is the UI part of it. Now for retrieve activities Java side, what I need to do is I need to again get the UI components references to my objects, edit text view, buttons, and so on. And I need to create an employee database helper object similarly. And then I have to get the employee code from my UI component, mcode text, and then convert that to a string. And similarly, perform a validity check. If the employee code is empty, the employee code hasn't been entered. So ask the user to enter the employee code. Please enter the employee code. So now, if it's not empty, I'm just trying to retrieve the record. String results will be, I'm returning it as a string array because that's how I've defined my retrieve record function, which I'll get back to you in a minute. I'm just passing this employee code into my retrieve record function, which I've written by myself in my employee database helper class. And then if these results are null, that means that nothing was retrieved, which means that there was such a user was not present in the database, such an employee was not present in the database. So employee code does not exist. So that's what I need to print over there. If the employee actually exists, this will not be null. So I need to populate those text views with the respective data. So results of 0 will contain my name, results of 1 will contain my gender, 2 will contain department, 3 will contain salary. That's how I've defined the results array to be in my employee database function. So I'll show the demo. I'll show you how that is defined. So this is a public, and this is returning a string array. So string box indicates the array, retrieve record, and will take an argument of employee code alone. So now I want to read the database. I do not want to write into the database. So for that I am getting an instance of get readable database. This dot get readable database, and I'm storing it in a DBA object. And then to obtain the values from the table, it will return something called as a cursor object. The db.query will return something called as a cursor object. This is similar to a result set object, which you might be familiar with in web programming or DBMS exercises. So cursor is similar to a result set. You need to traverse the cursor and get the values that you want. So for that, what I'm doing is db.query. The table I'm querying is employees table, and now what I need to specify is the string is basically the columns that I want to fetch. Table, the columns that I want to fetch. I want what columns that I want. I need to mention that as a string array. So I'm just mentioning a new string. I'm creating the object dynamically. So new string of name, gender, department, salary. I want those 4 columns in my query. Queries written. So those 4 objects, and selection must be done through employee code. Selection basically say it's like a where statement. Select star from employees where. That what is specified by my employee code. Selection is basically like a where statement, where clause, and where e code is equal to question mark. This question mark will be filled by this last argument. if you hover over it, like if you hover over the Java doc, you can see that more clearly. You can see selection args. What do you need to select it by? And there is also an argument for group by, having, order by. We are not using group by statements or having class or order by. We are not using anything like that. But if you want, you can also use that. For now, we are not using anything like that. So the selection arguments for me should be specified by another array. Even if I'm using only one string, you need to mention it as an array. So new string array of employee code. So I'm not using any group by, so that's null. Having is also again null. Order by is also null because I'm not using any of that. So now this will return. So as you can see, the E code is the selection argument is E code. The E code is mentioned from the argument. This is the argument that is mentioned from the function call. So now I need to create a string result, which should contain 4 string values, right? For one for name, one for gender, one for department, one for salary. So if cursor, first I need to traverse the cursor and see if something is present inside the cursor. So if cursor dot move to next, the cursor will be initially before the record. Like let's say if there is a record A, B, C, D, the cursor will initially be before A. So if cursor dot move to next, it will traverse through this first record and it will move to D. So it has now read A, B, C, D. So if cursor dot move to next, if something is there, it will read it. And then if move to next is present, like if it has not returned a null, that means that there is some content inside it. And here we do not need to traverse the cursor more than once because E code is our primary key. And since we are fetching by the primary key, we are bound to get only one record. If we are fetching by something else, that means that we will be getting more than one record and we need to traverse the cursor more than once. Since it's primary key, I need to traverse it only once. So if cursor dot move to next, that means the record is existing. So I need to get the values from the cursor and I need to put it inside my results array. So cursor dot get string of 0. 0th column contains my name as defined here. 1 will contain gender, 2 will contain department, 3 will contain salary. But 3 is a double value because that's how I've defined my table. Salary is a numeric. So I'm defining double dot to string of. I want everything as a string, so I'm converting that double to a string of cursor dot get double of. This will get me a double numeric value of the salary, and I'm converting that double value to a string, and then I'm returning a result. If the cursor dot move to next is it's false, like if the record was not there, that means it will go to the else statement, and there it will return the null. So if you can see here, if result is null, I'm printing that there is no such record. Otherwise, if there is something, I'll be populating the record to the UI using my returned array. So that's it for retrieve. I hope you're able to understand that. I'll show you a demo of how insert record works. So I'll just write a record over here. I'll just write John Doe main, and he belongs to the management department. Let's say his salary is 1 lakh or something, and if I just give add, it says E1024 record was added. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see the post notification over there. So this record was added. So now if I go to retrieve and if I press E1024 and if I try to fetch it, the record will be fetched. So this is what is happening. And if I try to fetch something else, E1025 record does not exist. So that's what is printed in the toast notification below. This is still E1024 record, which I might need to delete. I did not do that. So if I try to create another record with the same employee code, let's see what happens. I'll give him a different department and I'll give him a different salary. If I give add, it says unique constraint failed. It vanished too quickly. Basically, the primary key constraint is basically unique and not null, right? So the unique constraint was violated. So it says the record was not inserted. That's it. So that's it for insert record. One cool thing about using the Android Studio IDE is if you want to visualize, like if you want to see the database, like here you need to manually insert. I mean, you need to write a function for retrieve and then define all this logic to fetch a record, right? What if you want to just view the tables alone? Like if you want to check query the database directly without using any of these things, like there is something called as a database inspector, which is basically an application inside your Android Studio IDE. If you go click database inspector, here it's very small for me because I've zoomed in a little too much. I'll just open a window, and if I open a window, since I have this app open right now, and since I just queried the database recently, now I can see an employees DB over here, and inside the employees DB I have these are circles, that means the DB, and inside that I can find a table, and inside the table I can see E1024 John Doe is present inside it. I can also write some queries through this database inspector, which you can write out on your own. If I insert another record, E1025, so I'll just have him in the management department as well. If I add it, so as you can see, E1022, I made a mistake, it's 0125, but whatever. So that record is also shown in the database inspector. This is really helpful when you just write an add function and you want to see whether it's been added properly or not. This helps you visualize what's inside the database without having to actually write functions from the front end side to view the database. So if I go to retrieve and type E0125, I should be able to get the database. I mean, get the entry for it. Yeah, as you can see, the entry is being populated. So now, similarly, I'll show you how I've written the functions for update, retrieve, and other update. What else is there? Delete, retrieve, retrieve by department. So update record is similar. For update record, I have to get all the values from the user again. So if you go and check my update activity, it will again ask for everything. Like for the employee code, it should be the old employee code, because you should be able to update only existing employees, right? You cannot update new employees. That is basically an insert operation. So the existing employee code, changed the name, changed the gender name, changed the gender, male, female, or other, change the department, change salary. You can basically change any of the other things except employee code. And then if you press change, the change should happen. So again, I'll be doing some validity checking, which I'll show you later. So here the update function, update record function, takes the employee code, the name, the gender, the department, and the salary from the update activity Java file. And then now I have to write into the database again. So I'm using a get writable database. So inside get writable database, again I have to put some content values inside it. So content values updated record is new content values, and inside the content values key value store, I'm putting name as the name value as name, gender value as the gender object, gender string, department value as the department string, salary value as my double salary value. That is it. So now I have to call the function called db.update. Update will help me update the database table contents. So the table is employees. The updated record, the content values will be the updated record. You can see the function signature if you hover over here. Table, the table to update, values, a map from column names to new column values. Null means it will be translated to null. Where clause, using which value to update by, like basically we'll specify the primary key constraint on that, the arguments for the where clause, and that's it. So where clause will be ecode, because ecode is my primary key. You can also have other where clauses over that. That's basically your SQL logic. And the string will be, the parameters will be, the arguments will be new string array of the employee code. So if I update John Doe, that is E1024's record, the E1024 will be present here. And let's say I'm changing his name from John Doe to Jonathan Doe. So name will be Jonathan Doe, gender will be male, department will be again management, salary will be 1 lakh. That will be there. So that will update John Doe from Jonathan Doe. That's what will happen over here. So it will update, and I have to do a db.close, which I forgot conveniently. So be sure to do a db.close operation after updating. And for deleting, I need to get the employee code from the user. So I need to write into the database again. Deleting is also writing operation. It's the opposite of writing. So you need to get a writable database again. If you get a readable database, it will not be able to delete it. You cannot do delete operations, insert operations, update operations on a readable database. You need to get writable databases. So once you get a writable database instance, just call db.delete. db.delete will return an argument, return an integer value of how many rows that it deleted. So if it is 0, that means nothing was deleted. If it is 1, that means one record was deleted. If it's n, that means n values were n records were deleted. So I'm deleting something in employees table, and I'm deleting using the var class employee code. So this basically is delete from employees where employee code equal to E1024. So that is it. It will execute this SQL statement. You can also write raw SQL statements if you want. Instead of using delete function, you can also write let's say db.exec SQL, and you can just write delete from employees where e code equal to plus e code. This is also perfectly valid. You can also use this, but this is more convenient to use, so I'm using this. But if you want to, you can also write raw SQL statements using exec SQL, and that's basically it. And for retrieving by records, I need to retrieve records of all employees that are pertaining to a single department. So there will be multiple records. I need to traverse the records. So the logic will be different in the front end side. I'll show you what the logic is. So for retrieve many, it will be the same. The department you will be selecting. This will be a spinner. So you just need to select this department, and you just need to press get, and it will populate the values over here. Only one record can be populated over here, right? So I need to traverse through all these records. Let's say if there are multiple records. Since now I put John Doe and James Doe in my management department. So if I need to traverse them one by one, John Doe will only appear first of all, and then after that, if I want to view James Doe, I need to move through the returned entries, right? So I'm just having two buttons for it. This will move backwards by one record. This will move front by one record. So that's why I have two buttons over there for that purpose. And the logic, I'll explain the logic of how I did that a little bit later. First, I'll explain the function. So for retrieve by records, I have a function called public, and I'm returning a cursor object because I want to traverse the records in my code side. I do not want to return multiple string arrays over here. Like if I want to, I can return a 2D string array, but that will be a bit of a headache for me. I do not want to do that. So I'll just return a cursor itself, and I'll move the cursor over in my retrieve many Java file. So I'm just getting a readable database instance, and again I'm querying the employees table using, and I'll get the employee code, name, gender, and salary, and I'll select using the department. So select star except department. Basically, select star from employees where department is equal to new string of department. That department will contain the argument that the user entered from the UI side. So group by null, having is null, order by null. If I want to, I can order by let's say employee code ascending. I can do that if I want to, but I have not done all that. So if the cursor.get count basically returns how many records are inside the cursor. So if the count is 0, that means no records were returned by the db.query. The cursor object is empty. So if cursor.get count is 0, no records were retrieved, so return null. Otherwise, I will return the cursor. So that's basically it from the for the database helper side. So now I'll move on to the code for retrieve many. So for retrieve many, first I need to enable or disable these buttons. Okay, these buttons just vanished for some reason. See. Yeah, so I have these two buttons, right? Like this up and like forward and backwards arrow. Let's say if there's only one record. If there's only one record, you cannot move forwards or backwards, right? So these buttons need to be disabled. So I need to write logic for that. And also to indicate to the user that the button is disabled, I need to change the color of the button. So for that, I've written code over there. So public void enable button is just a function that I wrote. So it takes an image button. This is basically an image button. This is not a normal button. This is an image button. You can get an image button from here. What's different with the image button is it's basically just a button, but you can have an SRC compat. Basically, you can embed an image inside the button. That's it. There's not much else difference. And I'm just setting in enable button, and I'm getting a two arguments for the button object and the enabled argument, which is a boolean. Button.set enabled of enabled. So if it's false, it will be disabled. If it is true, it will be enabled. If it is not enabled, that means that I'll set the background tint to a gray color. Otherwise, I'll set it to a red color. this code, I did not memorize this code, I did not know this, I just got it from Stack Overflow. So this is something just that you need to get from through experience, I guess. So anyway, this is not really important right now. So initially my cursor results will be null. So first I'll again instantiate objects for my UI components and then enable both those buttons. I'll disable both those buttons. Now, once I press the get button, this get button, what the code should do is it should get the value from this spinner and convert that to a string, and then use the employee database helper dot retrieve by department records function, and then pass the department string value onto it, which will return my cursor. I'm storing the cursor in a cursor results object, which was initially null. So this will store the results that were obtained from the query. So if the result is again null, that means no records were retrieved. I'm just printing to the user that there were no employees in this particular department, and I'll just clear the text use. I'll just make it empty and I'll return it. That's it. If there were records that were retrieved, now I'll move to the first record. For that, I'll use the results. Results is basically a cursor object. You can see what methods are available in the cursor object using the autocomplete itself. There is this move before first, move to previous, is after last. There are different functions. I'll explain to you one by one of what I used. So move to first basically moves to the first record. So once it passes the first record, I can then set the text of text views over here to the first record. So mcode text view dot set text of first string will be employee code, because that's how I defined it over here. E code, name, gender, and salary. So it will be obtained in the same order. First will be employee code, second will be name, third will be gender, fourth will be salary. So I'm just setting text for those things. And then if the count is greater than 1, that means there's more than one record identified. Now I need to enable the next button. I should not enable the previous button because this is the first record. There's nothing before this. So I'll enable the next button alone. So for the next button, I have to set an on-click listener to move to the next button. So once I press the next button, that means there is something before it. So I need to enable the previous button right now. So once I enable the previous button, now I'll move to the next record. Once I move to the next record, I'll just populate that record. I'll just obtain the results that move to next will basically move to the next record. The cursor will move to the next record that's fetched, and then results that get string will get the second record's string values from it. So the second record's employee code, employee name, employee gender, and employee salary will be fetched. And if this is the last, let's say there are only 2 records and we are currently in the second record. So this will be the last record, right? So results.isLast will check if this is the last record. So if this is the last record, there is nothing more to traverse after this. So I need to disable the next button. So enable button of next button will be set to false. So this will disable the next button because this is my last record. Similarly, for my previous button, I'll just, if there is something, if I move previous, that means there's something next to it. So I'll enable the next button, and then I'll set the move to previous. I'll move the results cursor to the previous thing using move to previous function, and then once it's moved to the previous record, I'll just set the text of the record that's currently in the cursor, which is basically the previous record. And then if this is the first record, let's say there are only 2 records, I went to 1 and 2, and then from 2 I came back to 1. So this is my first record. There is no record before this. So the previous button should again now be disabled, right? So if results dot is first, if this is the first record, this button will be disabled again. So enable button of previous button will be set to false. So I'll show you how it works. If I go to retrieve by department, the department I have currently selected is management. If I get, you can see the first record is populated with John Doe. I'll just move it a little bit. So there's employee code is 1024, name is John Doe, the gender is male, and salary is 1 lakh. Now the previous button is disabled because this is the first record, but the next button is enabled because there's another record. James Doe is after this. So if I move to the next one, it moves to James Doe. So and it displays the James Doe's record. So now the next button is disabled because this is my last record. The previous button is enabled because there is a record previous to this. So again I can move back. So by this way I can traverse to and fro from my records that were returned from my query. So that is it. If I return a string array, I will be needing to um, move through the string array, but with string arrays, I will not be able to use these functions like move to previous, is first, is last. Those functions will not be available to me. These functions make my life easier with respect to coding the logic for these buttons, right? So it's better to return a cursor when you have multiple records and then traverse the cursor from your code side instead of returning string arrays. So this will be easier for you. And that concludes my demonstration. If you want, I'll show uh, an example of how update works also. So for update record, if I give E1024 and I change the name, I change the name to Jonathan Doe. It's currently John Doe, and I'll move him to the technical department, and I'll give him a salary of 80,000. If I give change, the record was updated. If I go to the database inspector, now Jonathan Doe is there. John Doe has disappeared. Basically, the record was updated, and now his department is technical, and his salary is 80,000. So now if I go to retrieve, and if I give E1024, I'll be able to see the updated record. So Jonathan Doe, male, technical, and 80,000. So if retrieve by department, if I get management department, now there's only one guy, James Doe. If I go to technical department, there's only one guy over here. Here is Jonathan Doe. If I go to legal and auditing, there's no one, so it will be empty. There are no employees in the legal and auditing department. The toast is shown. That's it. Now, if I want to delete Jonathan Doe, I'll just need to put E1024 and just click remove. So it says E1024's record has been deleted successfully, and these text views basically displays the purged record. This basically displays the details of the record that was purged. So Jonathan Doe, male, technical, and 80,000 was purged, and now James Doe is only present here. It doesn't matter if I close this and let's say I'll basically terminate this process and I'll close this. If I save the state and the emulator is closed, if I run this emulator again, since we are using a database right now, the data that I've entered previously will persist. Like the database will already be existing. So if I go back to the application and if I try to retrieve a record, and if I put E0125, that was a record, I think that was James Doe's record, E1025, that record will still be there. This is what SQLite helps us with. It gives us persistence. Data will persist even if you move away from the application or switch off your phone or whatever. The records will be stored inside a DB file and it will be available for you as long as you have your application. If this application is uninstalled, it will go away. Otherwise, it will be there. So you can use your database inspector for navigating through the database as well. So this concludes my demo. If you have any other doubts, you can ask me. If you are clear, everything clear? Fine.